No one in Riverton, Oregon talked quietly. They whispered loudly, judged faster, and remembered mistakes forever. So when Elena Hart, a 19-year-old scholarship student, walked out of the courthouse with tears in her eyes and her head held high, the town noticed. What they didn't know was that her entire life had collapsed just 3 days earlier. Elena was not reckless. She was not careless. She was not what people were starting to call her. She was a girl who trusted the wrong man. The scandal started when leaked photos, edited, misleading, cruel, spread through campus group chats and then into Riverton's Facebook pages. By nightfall, her landlord wanted her out. By morning, her university advisor stopped replying. By afternoon, even her relatives stopped answering calls. In Riverton, reputation was everything, and Elena was being buried alive. That same evening, as she sat alone on a cold courthouse bench, a man she barely knew stood a few feet away, silent, composed, unmistakably out of place among the chaos. Daniel Cross, 32, former Army legal officer, now a private consultant who rarely spoke unless necessary. He wasn't looking at her with curiosity. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her like someone studying a problem that could still be solved. They had met only twice before. Once when Daniel helped her late mother with a veterans benefits appeal, and once at the funeral, where Elena had thanked him through tears. That was it. No friendship, no connection, no romance. Yet when Daniel finally spoke, his voice was steady and deliberate. "Marry me." Elena laughed once, a sharp, broken sound. "I'm serious," he said calmly. She stood up, shaking. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Daniel replied. "I know this town. I know what they'll do to you. And I know how fast they'll stop if you're someone's wife." Her stomach twisted. "You want me to pretend for your image?" "No," he said, "for your dignity." The words hit harder than any insult she had heard all week. Daniel explained it plainly. A legal marriage, no romance, no expectations, separate rooms, a public shield, nothing more. In Riverton, a married woman wasn't a rumor. She was off limits. "You won't owe me anything," he added. "This ends when you're safe again." Elena searched his face for hidden motives. There were none, just resolve. She thought of her mother's voice telling her, "Never let people decide who you are." She thought of the stairs waiting for her outside. She thought of how tired she was of defending herself. So she asked the only question that mattered. "Why would you do this?" Daniel hesitated for the first time. "Because once," he said quietly, "no one protected my sister, and I still live with that." An hour later, with trembling hands and borrowed courage, Elena signed the papers. No rings. No vows, no witnesses who smiled, just two strangers bound by a decision that would change both their lives. As they walked out together, cameras flashed, whispers stopped mid-sentence. Daniel offered his arm, not possessively but respectfully. Elena took it. She didn't know it yet, but this marriage, meant only to save her name, was about to test every wall she had built around her heart. Make sure to like and subscribe for more adult stories. The house was too quiet for newlyweds. That was the first thing Elena noticed when Daniel unlocked the front door and stepped aside for her to enter. No flowers, no warmth, no awkward excitement. Just a clean, modern home sitting on the edge of Riverton, surrounded by tall pine trees and distance from gossiping neighbors. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a safe zone. "You can take the guest room," Daniel said, placing her single suitcase near the stairs. "It has a private bathroom, lock on the inside." The last part mattered. Elena nodded, suddenly aware of how tense her shoulders were. She had said yes to marriage, not to vulnerability. As she climbed the stairs, she expected questions, curiosity, maybe regret. There was none. That night she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of Daniel moving around downstairs. No footsteps near her door, no intrusion, just distance, intentional and respectful. The next morning, Riverton exploded. Photos of Mrs. Cross flooded social media. Speculation turned into confusion. Rumors stalled. The same people who had been calling her names now asked how long they'd been together. At breakfast, Daniel slid a printed document across the table. "Ground rules," he said. Elena blinked. "You made a contract." "A framework," he corrected. She read silently. No physical relationship. No entering each other's rooms without permission. Public respect, private independence. Either party can end the marriage after 6 months. Absolute honesty. Her fingers paused at the last line. "Honesty?" she asked. Daniel met her eyes. If this turns into something either of us can't handle, we say it out loud, immediately. That surprised her more than anything else. Most men she'd known avoided truth when it got uncomfortable. Days passed, then weeks. They learned each other in fragments. Daniel woke at 5 a.m., worked quietly, and returned home with groceries already sorted. He never asked where she went, but he always noticed when she came home shaken. Elena returned to campus under a new name. Mrs. Cross wasn't questioned. Professors nodded politely. The whispers softened, but safety didn't mean healing. Some nights she cried silently into her pillow, reliving the messages, the betrayal, the way the world had turned on her overnight. One night Daniel knocked. "May I come in?" he asked from the hallway. She hesitated, then unlocked the door. He didn't step inside. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, giving her space. "You didn't eat," he said. "I wasn't hungry." A pause. "They tried to do this to my sister," Daniel said suddenly. "She didn't survive the pressure." Elena's breath caught. "She didn't die," he clarified, "but she disappeared from herself, dropped out, moved away, never trusted again." His jaw tightened. "I won't let that happen to you." For the first time since the courthouse, Elena cried openly, without shame, without defense. Daniel stayed. He didn't touch her. He didn't fix her. He just stayed. And that was when Elena realized something terrifying. This man, this stranger, was becoming the safest place she had left. Not because he loved her, not because he wanted her, but because he respected her. She didn't know it yet, but the rules meant to keep them distant were already being tested by silence, by shared pain, and by a connection neither of them had planned for. Riverton did not forgive. It only paused. For 2 weeks the town behaved. Smiles returned, comments softened. The scandal lost its heat, at least on the surface. But Elena felt it. The way conversation stopped when she entered a room. The way people smiled too politely. The way curiosity sharpened into calculation. One Friday evening, Daniel came home later than usual. "There's a fundraiser tomorrow," he said, setting his keys down carefully. "Mayor, university board, donors. We're expected to attend." Elena's chest tightened. Together. Yes. She hadn't stood beside him in public since the courthouse. The idea of stepping back into Riverton's spotlight made her stomach turn. Daniel noticed. "We can leave early," he added, "and if anyone crosses a line, I'll handle it." That night, Elena stood in front of the mirror longer than she ever had. She chose a navy blue dress. Simple, modest, unremarkable, invisible, safe. When they arrived, the room shifted. Heads turned. Whispers flickered like static. A few women looked surprised. A few men looked disappointed. Daniel placed a hand on the small of her back. Not possessive, not intimate. Protective. It was enough. Then came Mark Reynolds. Elena recognized him instantly. "The man whose lies started everything." "Didn't expect to see you here," Mark said, smirking. "Congratulations on the arrangement." Daniel stepped forward before Elena could speak. "Choose your next words carefully," he said, calm but lethal. Mark laughed. "Relax, I'm just saying, it's impressive how fast reputations can be repaired." Silence spread. Elena felt it, the old shame crawling back. Before she could stop herself, Daniel spoke again. "My wife doesn't owe anyone an explanation," he said. "But since you're curious, she was targeted, manipulated, and publicly humiliated by someone who lacked the courage to tell the truth." Mark's smile faded. "And if you ever speak to her like that again," Daniel continued, voice steady, "I will make sure your name never recovers as easily as hers did." People were watching now. Mark backed away. Elena's hands were shaking. Outside, under the cold night sky, she finally exhaled. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Daniel turned to her. "Yes, I did." She looked at him differently then, not as a shield, but as a man willing to stand in fire for her. That night something changed. Later, as they sat in the living room, Daniel poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. "You should know," he said quietly, "this marriage, it's starting to cost me." Elena froze. "What do you mean?" "My firm lost a client today," he admitted. "They said my personal life was complicated." Guilt slammed into her chest. "I never asked you to sacrifice anything." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why I didn't mention it." A long pause. "Daniel," she said softly, "why are you really doing this?" He looked away, then back. "Because every time I see you flinch," he said. "I remember the moment I looked away when my sister needed me most." His voice cracked just slightly. "That's the line I crossed," he added. "Not as your husband, as a man." Elena didn't respond. She reached out, not to touch him, but to place her hand beside his on the couch. "Close," not connected. Yet, she didn't know it yet, but Riverton had just drawn battle lines, and the next attack wouldn't come from strangers, but from the one place Elena thought was finally safe. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Plain white, no return address. Elena noticed it first because Daniel froze when he picked it up. Just for a second, but long enough. "What is it?" she asked casually, though something in his posture unsettled her. "Nothing," Daniel replied too quickly. "Probably junk." He slid it into a drawer and changed the subject. But that night, long after the lights were off and the house returned to its careful silence, Elena couldn't sleep. The image of that envelope pressed against her thoughts like a bruise. At 2:14 a.m., she heard the drawer open downstairs. Then a sharp inhale. She stood at the top of the stairs, unseen. Daniel was seated at the kitchen table, the letter open, his face pale in the low light. "You're not supposed to know," a woman's voice said. Elena's breath caught. A video call glowed on Daniel's laptop. "I never planned for it to come back," the woman continued. "But now that you're married, people are asking questions." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I told you this was over." "I know," the woman said, "but she deserves to know." Elena stepped down one stair. Her foot creaked. Daniel looked up. Their eyes met. The call went silent. "Who is she?" Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. "My sister," he said. Elena's heart pounded. "I thought you said she disappeared." "She did," he replied, "from me." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. "The letter is from the state board," Daniel continued. "They reopened her case." Elena frowned. "Case?" Daniel exhaled. 5 years ago, I was assigned to review a harassment complaint inside a military legal unit, he said. My sister was a civilian intern. Elena's stomach dropped. She reported a senior officer, Daniel said. Powerful, connected. He swallowed. I believed the evidence wasn't strong enough. I advised her to wait. Elena already knew where this was going. They buried it, he said quietly. And when the backlash came, I stayed silent. The room felt smaller. She thought you betrayed her, Elena said. Daniel nodded. I did. And now, she asked. The officer was exposed in another case, Daniel said. They're reopening everything, including my role. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. You protected me because you failed her. Yes, the truth settled heavily between them. You didn't marry me out of kindness alone, Elena said. You married me out of guilt. Daniel didn't deny it. I needed to do it right this time, he said. Elena stood abruptly. The safety she had felt cracked. Then what am I to you, she demanded. A second chance, a conscience reset. Daniel rose too, his voice firm but raw. You are not a replacement. You are not a mistake. And you are not being used. Then why does this feel like a lie? She asked, tears burning. Because the truth is messy, Daniel said, and I should have told you sooner. Silence fell. Elena turned toward the stairs. I need space, she said. Real space, not rules. She locked her door that night for the first time. Downstairs, Daniel sat alone, staring at the unopened half of the letter, knowing that the next decision he made could either finally redeem him or lose Elena forever. She didn't know it yet, but the next part of their story wouldn't be about protection. It would be about choice. Elena didn't sleep. She lay on her side, facing the wall, listening to the house breathe, pipes settling, wind brushing the windows. The faint creak of the stairs she knew Daniel wouldn't climb. Morning came without clarity. By 7 a.m. she was dressed, bag packed, keys in hand. She stopped at the front door. Leaving would be easy. Staying would not. Downstairs, Daniel stood in the kitchen, already awake, already expecting her. I'll go, he said before she could speak. If you want space, I'll stay somewhere else. The offer stunned her. Most men fought to be forgiven. Daniel was willing to be absent. That's not what I meant, Elena replied quietly. I don't want you to disappear. I want to understand why I'm still here. Daniel nodded once. Then we talk. They sat at opposite ends of the table. Elena folded her hands. If this marriage is about your guilt, I can't carry that. It's not only guilt, Daniel said, but guilt is part of it. I won't lie again. She studied his face. The exhaustion, the restraint, the constant self-control. What happens when this ends? She asked. When your sister's case is over, when I'm no longer a reminder. Daniel answered immediately. I don't know. That honesty hurt more than a lie. Later that day, Elena walked the campus alone. For the first time in weeks, she felt exposed again, not to gossip but to herself. She realized something terrifying. The marriage had protected her from Riverton, but Daniel had protected her from herself, her shame, her isolation, her fear of being seen. And now she had to decide if she was strong enough to stand without him. That evening she found Daniel in the garage, packing a small bag. "I'm not asking you to leave," she said. He stopped. "I'm asking you to stay," she continued, voice steady, "but not as my shield, as my equal." Daniel turned slowly. "I can do that," he said, "but it means you'll see everything I've been avoiding." "I already am," Elena replied. They stood there, not touching, not smiling, choosing. That night Elena unlocked her door, not because she was ready to forgive, but because she was ready to face what staying would cost her. She didn't know it yet, but staying would demand more courage than running ever could. And Daniel's past wasn't done knocking. The notice arrived by email. Subject line: Official Hearing State Review Board. Daniel read it twice before forwarding it to Elena. "I don't expect you to come," he said when she looked up from her phone. "This is my failure to face." Elena didn't answer right away. She had learned something about silence, how heavy it was, how easily it became a weapon. "I'm coming," she said. Daniel frowned. "You don't owe me. I'm not doing this for you," she interrupted. "I'm doing it because I know what it's like when people talk about you instead of listening to you." The hearing room was smaller than Elena expected. No grand courtroom, no drama, just a long table, neutral walls, and a dozen faces trained to observe, not comfort. Daniel's sister, Mara, sat across the room. She didn't look at him. The officer's case was summarized. Timelines, emails, missed interventions. Then Daniel was called forward. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. "I failed in my duty," he said, "legally and personally. I believed neutrality was safety." It was. Mara's jaw tightened. Then the panel turned to Elena. "You're not required to speak," one member said, "but you asked to." Elena stood. Her heart pounded, but this time she didn't shrink. "I'm not here as his wife," she said. "I'm here as someone who understands what happens when silence becomes permission." The room stilled. "I was judged before I was heard," Elena continued, "and I survived because one person decided to stand with me instead of staying comfortable." She looked at Mara then. "Protection isn't love if it comes too late," she said softly, "but accountability can still matter." Mara finally looked up. Tears stood in her eyes, not from anger, but from something closer to release. The hearing ended without applause, without closure. But something had shifted. Outside, Daniel didn't speak. Neither did Elena. Later that night, Mara called. "I don't forgive you," she told Daniel, "but I saw you today." After the call, Daniel sat heavily on the couch. "I don't deserve her understanding," he said. Elena sat beside him, not close, not distant. "Deserve isn't the point," she replied. "Showing up is." For the first time, Daniel reached for her hand, not in desperation, not in gratitude, in trust. She didn't know it yet, but what they had just built in that room would soon be tested by something neither of them had prepared for. Feelings that refused to stay inside the rules. It didn't happen in a dramatic moment. No argument, no confession, no stolen kiss. It happened in the quiet, in the ordinary spaces, where pretending became harder than telling the truth. A week after the hearing, Elena noticed the rules written on the fridge, still there, unchanged. No physical relationship, absolute honesty. She stared at them longer than necessary. That evening, Daniel came home soaked from the rain, jacket dripping onto the floor. Without thinking, Elena handed him a towel. Their fingers brushed. Both froze. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. Daniel stepped back first. "I should change." He retreated upstairs, door closing softly. Elena stood alone in the kitchen, heart racing. The rule had not been broken, but it had been challenged. Over the next days, distance returned, but strained, deliberate. Daniel spoke less. Elena slept less. At night, she caught herself listening for his footsteps again, not out of fear, but out of something far more dangerous. Hope. One evening, she found him in the study, staring at an old photo. Mara, younger, smiling. "She sent this," Daniel said quietly. "Said she's moving back to Oregon." Elena felt a sharp, unexpected ache. "That's good," she said. "For you." Daniel looked at her. "It complicates things." "For her, for us." The word hung between them. Elena took a breath. "Then we need to talk about what this is." Daniel stood, slowly, carefully. "I'm not allowed to want you," he said. "Not like this." Elena's voice trembled. "Because of the rules. Because of the reason we married," he replied. "I don't want you to ever wonder if this was obligation." Silence stretched. Then Elena said the thing she had been holding back for weeks. "I already want you," she admitted, "and I hate that I do." Daniel closed his eyes. That's why one of us has to step back, he said, before this turns into something that hurts you. Elena swallowed. So which one of us walks away? Daniel picked up his keys. I do, he said. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through the house. Elena sank into the chair, tears spilling freely. The rule hadn't been broken by touch or words. It had broken because love had arrived where it was never supposed to live. She didn't know it yet, but Daniel's absence would force Elena to answer the hardest question of all. Was this marriage only a shelter, or had it become her home? The next morning the house felt hollow. Every corner whispered Daniel's absence. His coffee mug still sat on the counter. His jacket hung in the hall. Even the fridge, where the rules remained taped, looked smaller, lonelier. Elena tried to focus on classes, on campus life, on the monotony of survival. But each time her phone buzzed, hope surged and crashed. By evening, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She grabbed her keys, a raincoat, and drove without a plan. Only one destination mattered: Daniel. His apartment was empty. Not a note, not a call, nothing. Panic rose, then clarity. She remembered the trails behind his house, paths through the pines where he often ran to think. She drove there, parking on the gravel, heart pounding. Rain slicked the road, soaking her hair, but she didn't care. And then she saw him. Daniel stood under a massive pine, shoulders hunched, staring at nothing, as though the forest held answers the world never could. Elena, he said without turning, you shouldn't have come. I couldn't stay behind, she said, voice breaking. I can't let you leave like this. Not when I. Her words stumbled, caught between fear and need. Daniel finally turned, eyes wet, expression raw. You deserve more than this, than a man who married you out of guilt. I don't care why it started, Elena shouted, stepping closer, soaked through. I care about what's real now. I care about us. The rain poured, mixing with her tears. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's hand reached for hers, but stopped midair. If I step closer, this could all go wrong, he said. Then we risk it, she said fiercely. I'm done waiting for the perfect reason to feel what we've been ignoring. And then he did. Hands finally met, tentatively, cautiously, but with purpose. Elena's head rested on his shoulder as the storm raged around them. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The rules that had defined them shattered silently in the forest. Daniel whispered, almost to himself, I wasn't supposed to want this, you. I wasn't supposed to either, Elena replied, voice trembling, but I do. And in that moment, wet and vulnerable, under the relentless Oregon rain, they let themselves be more than a marriage of convenience. They let themselves be home. She didn't know it yet, but the town of Riverton, their past mistakes, and the shadows of guilt would not be done testing them. The storm passed, leaving the forest dripping with mist, but the calm didn't last. Riverton noticed. Photos of Elena and Daniel walking together through the pines leaked on social media. Speculation exploded. Are they actually in love? Scandal turned fairy tale. What about her reputation? Elena tried to ignore it. Daniel didn't. He sat her down one evening, hands on hers. This isn't about what they think, he said. It's about us, and that includes Mara. Elena stiffened. Mara, you mean your sister? Yes, Daniel said. She's back in town, and she's complicated. She wants answers, closure, maybe even to fix what she thinks I broke. When Mara arrived, Elena met her at the doorstep. She expected cold judgment, but instead found a woman who had carried pain silently for years. I've watched you protect her, Mara said, eyes flicking to Elena, and I don't know if I'm angry at him or relieved, maybe both. Elena nodded. I didn't marry him for love, but we found something real along the way. Mara studied her. You love him. Yes, Elena admitted, and I won't apologize. Mara sighed, finally cracking a faint smile. Then I can't stop it, but I will watch, carefully. The next weeks tested them. Riverton's whispers returned, subtle digs from neighbors, faculty, and former classmates. Each dinner party, each grocery store run, each glance from the courthouse reminded them that love wasn't enough to silence judgment. But every challenge strengthened them. They navigated it together. Discreet gestures, shared glances, silent understanding. Elena learned Daniel's little quirks, the way he always noticed when she was tense, the way he left her coffee the way she liked it. Daniel learned to lean on her, not to protect her from the world, but to let her protect him from his own guilt. One evening, as the three sat in the living room, Mara, Elena, and Daniel, Mara finally said, You're not perfect, Daniel, but maybe what you have is enough to be human. Daniel swallowed. It has to be. Elena squeezed his hand under the table, a silent promise. For the first time, they felt Riverton's scrutiny as background noise, not a threat. She didn't know it yet, but the final part would demand they define love not as protection, not as obligation, but as choice, and prove to themselves that a marriage made for dignity could become a love worth fighting for. The morning sun filtered through the tall pines, casting a golden glow on the house that had been silent for too long. Elena stood at the window, tracing the droplets of last night's rain as they slid down the glass. Daniel appeared behind her, quiet, careful. She didn't turn, she already felt his presence. "I'm not leaving," he said softly, placing his hand over hers on the windowpane. "Not ever, not unless you want me to." Elena turned, meeting his gaze. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the steady rhythm of truth that had taken months to grow. "I don't," she whispered. "I want us, all of it, even the messy, complicated parts." Daniel smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. "Then we choose, not because of guilt, not because of rules, but because this us is real." They embraced in the living room, finally allowing their marriage to be what it had been quietly becoming: home, love, and trust entwined. Mara watched from the doorway, eyes soft, a small approving nod acknowledging their journey. Weeks later, Riverton still whispered, but Elena and Daniel no longer flinched. They had redefined their story on their terms. Together, not as strangers bound by circumstance, but as partners bound by choice. The past had tested them, gossip had tried to shape them, but love, respect, and courage had won. Elena turned to Daniel, laughing through tears. "We survived it all, and we still have each other." Daniel held her close. Together, always together. The camera pans out, capturing the house, the pines, the sunrise. A perfect symbol of a life reclaimed. "Thank you for watching this journey." Elena's voice narrates warmly to the audience. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more emotional storytelling that keeps you hooked. Every like, comment, and share helps bring these stories to life. Daniel added with a grin, "Here, to love, honesty, and building your own home, wherever life takes you." The screen fades on the couple, hands entwined, hearts open, a final testament that even a marriage born of necessity can grow into a love worth fighting for. Watch more adult stories in our channel page.